Parsons Musical Design, and one of his current projects, Killer Queen, is out there playable on the floor. Is Nick here too? That would be Nick. Nick Becros?
Yes.
Yeah, I got it right. He is also involved in Killer Queen. He's an instructor at School of Visual Arts, and he's the creative director for Smashwords. Let's see. Do we have the Lewandowskis? Or either or one? No? We may have them later when they find the Magnolia. Is it? You know I'm going to ruin it. Syed? Yeah. Syed Salahuddin.
Close enough?
Close enough? What's the right way?
That's great.
All right, cool. He's the adjunct professor at NYU. He's also the co-founder of the Indy Games art collective Baby Castles in the East Coast. You may have heard of them. They've been written up an awful lot. Who did I miss? I missed Matt Hackett, didn't I?
Yo, right here.
Matt Hackett. Oh, hi, Matt. He's the co-founder of Lost Decade Games, along with Jeff Blair. Jeff's here, but he's at the booth, right?
He's at the Crypt Run table.
Okay, and you stole my thunder. Your game is Crypt Run, right? So the guys that are supposed to be here that, I don't know, maybe they're still out there, maybe they forgot that this was the panel, is Team 2-Bit. It's Matt Kane, Lewandowski, and Jake Lewandowski, and they're here with Fist Puncher, which you may have bought on Steam. I think they actually got it, right? You have one Lewandowski? No.
You just didn't meet.
Who did I miss?
I should be at the very back.
Mark from Megabase Studios, Mark Darrow? Yes, you're there. Your current project is Siege Breakers, and you're working on your master's in game design at UC Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
So you're there. It's the wacky article. So what this is supposed to be is sort of a roundtable to talk about. They didn't coin the name New Arcade Movement. We did when we were trying to come up with. Ken, what was your initial thing for what it was? We came up with some very terrible names to try to put. To try to put all you indie guys into a nice little corporate box and come up with a name that, sort of summarizes everything you do and then therefore sucks all the life out of it. But the idea was that you're all working on or have worked on games that sort of, that have some DNA with the classic games that are here on display. But when we start talking about new arcade game, obviously it's a super vague term. How do you guys feel about that term? Is anybody pissed off that we called you guys the New Arcade Movement? Does that ring false to anybody up here?
I'm just happy to be part of a movement.
Fair enough. If you're okay with that title, how do you feel? What defines a new arcade game? What you're doing? How do you feel that what you're doing ties you to the games that are here on display for the classic arcade games? What defines a new arcade game? Is it mechanics? Is it design? Is it?
I think a lot of it is like what the inspiration is. Like I know that our game Crypt Run is very inspired by Gauntlet, because like my best arcade memories all revolve around like those voices from Gauntlet. Everyone's probably familiar. You're like Blue Wizard's about to die. Like for me the arcade's noisy, but you always heard that. Like no matter where I was, I always heard that, and I was like, I gotta go play Gauntlet again, And that drives like it's probably all my game design. So it's like it's there. It's always at the surface, regardless of what it actually produce. It all comes from arcade stuff.
I think also for a lot of the games it's about local multiplayer, and of course a lot of the classic games have multiplayer, but not all of them, and not even all the new ones. But I think that's something that is separating us from playing on your Xbox at home, for instance.
I guess there's also a certain design aesthetic with old games that kind of emphasizes the short form. I mean, the games were made to suck quarters, right? So whereas like home, NES games and Xbox games and all those games are more of a long form where you have a player there for hours and hours and hours on end. So that's interesting. But the short form has kind of been abandoned a little bit, and I think it's time for a revival.
I guess for me personally, it's the space, the venue. Like one of the most incredible things about this convention here is that you get to share all these amazing games with all these different people. I love, taking games that are might be just online games and then building cabinets for them and showing them and then having a party and celebrating them.
With Siege Breakers, I think we're a little bit of a step removed. We see ourselves as largely a couch co-op game, kind of fostering that experience of the old N64 PS1 days. But a lot of our design decisions, you can trace them back into the old arcade beat-em-ups like Gauntlet, My personal favorite, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles beat 'em up, Donatello.
Well, Nick, you touched on something that the sort of the scope of the design, the fact that home games are much more designed to be long experiences, and that we have lost the idea of the short experience. Yet, I would argue that the original design thing was exactly to suck quarters. Like, you know, there's games that I can walk up to, I get to level 3, it's time to pay. You know, why go back to that? Because clearly that seems like that design aesthetic was specific to the need to continue getting players to pump quarters into the machine. What still makes, now that we've removed that aspect, the financial aspect, what still makes that a compelling way to design a game? Why still go back to that?
Because there was something special. I mean, inadvertently, they did something special, which was they made games that were really approachable, number one, right? Anybody can walk up to Centipede and get it, like, right away. And number two, they were short. It was like, sometimes I want to see a movie. Sometimes I want to watch The Sopranos. It's a totally different experience. So I don't think that we should abandon one for another.
I think a lot of it comes from the accomplishment that you get from doing really well in an arcade game. For example, like if anyone follows Nintendo over the years, they started off very hard. Like Super Mario Brothers 1 was really hard. But then these days, like the current Mario Galaxy 2, like if you fail the same level 3 times in a row, there's I forget what it is, a fairy appears or something, and they're like, you want to skip it? You know, like you can't do that in Donkey Kong. If someone tells you I got 500,000 on Donkey Kong, you're like, wow, that's amazing, right? But like you go back to the Mario game, and it's like, yeah, I beat Mario Galaxy 2, and you're like, okay, I mean, I know I beat it, but like, did you use the fairy, or did you like skip half the levels? Because you can skip as much as you want. But these like the games that are built like the ones that we're talking about, the arcade style, they're like, it's a little more brutal, I think, and it's like it validates the accomplishments, and you can really wear it on your sleeve and brag about it, and be like, oh, I beat that game. It feels good, you know. Other people who know what skill that takes appreciate it.
Fair enough. Anybody else? I mean, you know, everybody doesn't have to answer every question. I wanted to just flow. If you hear something that you'd like, just jump in. You mentioned specifically the social aspect. Like, you know, I grew up in the era of arcades, much to my mom's chagrin. She always thought I was going to go get mugged or kidnapped or something like that. I went to very friendly arcades, never had a problem. But there was a completely different dynamic when I'm talking with somebody next to a 400-pound plywood machine that's made for like one game and you play it better than anything else. There's a different, you know, there was etiquette in arcades, you know, there's certain understood things. There was a different kind of social interaction. With what you're doing, are you designing, some of you have said, you know, you're going for couch co-op with Siege Breakers. Are you designing specifically to try to create or recreate some of those social interactions? When you build your games, how do you expect your players to react? What are you trying to reinforce and trying to encourage in your player base?
So with the kind of couch co-op experience, we really wanted that kind of, I guess, fraternal experience where you're kind of shouting and yelling at each other. So very frantic pace, something that requires communication. So a lot of our design decisions are built around the idea that it's going to be a group of 4 friends who are constantly screwing up, can constantly make mistakes, and it's just really fast-paced, lots of actions. It's stacked against you. I think the idea of arcade difficulty and that kind of rewarding challenge by being able to surmount it is something else that we also have a focus on. It's very difficult to be able to beat our game.
I think that multiplayer games for arcade are, that's really where social games started, right? Like my first memories is, you know, maybe there's a Nintendo game that's 2-player, like Mario Brothers, you take turns or something, but when it comes to like either co-op with like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles you're talking about, like I'm Donatello and you're Leonardo and we're together, we're working on stuff, you know? These days it's like with the Halo generation, I guess you'd call it. Like you get on Xbox, you got your headset, and people are just saying the worst stuff that you've ever heard in your life. It's offensive and it's vulgar, and you just kind of turn it off. And it's that anonymity of the internet, right? And with an arcade, you don't get that. You get the person next to you. You can like, you know, you feel your bumping elbows. You can feel their heat, and like you're both excited. And like when you're done, you're like, you know, good game. And you like shake hands, and like there's more camaraderie. As opposed to online where it's just like everyone hates everyone, everything's filthy and dirty, and it's like it just it feels disgusting sometimes. And like I think the arcade movement is like a step towards bringing that back, you know, like the nicety of the like good game handshake type stuff.
I mean, I grew up in New York, and I definitely grew up in arcades. I was in Times Square constantly at Playland.
Station Break, 34th
Station
Street.
Break,
Oh, God.
and Space Station,
Yeah, it's where I grew up.
Chinatown Fun. Yeah, those were great arcades. And there were a lot of tough customers in there. And, you know, we were not the best kids in the world, for sure. But we were civil to each other. Like, you know, in the arcade, we were all friends. It was not this, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it kind of disgusts me.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I walked into an online, I work for Activision, so the Call of Duty player is, frankly, the worst possible example of what you're talking about. I walked in and...
League of Legends.
Yeah, exactly. It's like everybody's there with something to prove. And when I would go to the arcades, I didn't define myself based on whether or not I got the high score that day, but I find that a lot of gamers that play online now do. This is the only thing they're good at, or they're very insecure about it or whatever, so they come in and they immediately start talking trash to try to make themselves feel better. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with saying good game, you know? Like, yeah, dude, I totally shot you in the head. I have shut up more people by going, yeah, man, that was a great shot. You're a good player. They don't know how to respond. You know? They're not expecting an actual human interaction. They do things over the headset that you would never do to somebody. I had somebody the other day, I walked into a lobby and unprovoked, just, hey guys, I'm an MLG Pro. Just step out right now. You better just back out because I'm an MLG Pro. And I was like, yeah, and I work for Activision. And my entire team just laughed because I work for Activision, you know? Like, but it's here's a weird question. Can you design games in what you do to reinforce that kind of positive social behavior? Can you make a game through what you're doing to try to encourage, not just, I mean, co-op games, obviously, if we both die, we both die, but if we work together, we succeed. I love co-op games for that very reason. My wife's a big gamer, but hates competition, only wants to play co-op games. Can you do something, even for the current generation of home consoles, to bring that ethic back and reward people who are really interested in reinforcing the positive social aspects of gaming the way that you used to have in the old arcade games? I guess not.
Has anybody played Journey by chance?
Oh, yeah.
This is a game so that game's really interesting because you can't talk to each other, you can just make little noises. And you've got these two characters walking around exploring this world, and like they can just go like, "Pew," just make these little squeaky sounds. And a lot of people prefer that over a teenager who's like, you know, just cursing at you nonstop. So that can kind of make it a nicer situation, just by extreme limitations could be good.
But is that the answer? Like basically muting everyone?
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad. I think that's a little sad.
Yeah, it's sad.
I mean, that game is awesome, and I know what you're
It's a
talking
nice
about.
step. It's a
Yes,
right direction.
but
It's a little too limiting, right? I think for the communication, like we want to keep right.
yes. I mean, I actually want to speak to people.
Yeah, I think
That's valid.
that what we can do is bring people face to face, right? It's like that when you play Call of Duty face to face with somebody, you generally are pretty nice to them, right? I think it's that the internet is what makes us not get along so well, I guess.
Jerks.
Yeah, the internet gives you this feeling of safety where you can just kind of lash out without retribution. It's a useful tool in the sense that when you don't see anybody playing next to you, it kind of feels like you're playing against a really deep AI almost. But there's the downside of everyone turns into a raging jerk.
Yeah, but you wouldn't like curse at AI, right? Like the fact that there is a human being there to hear you get berated, it's almost...
Depends on the AI.
I certainly curse in frustration, but I don't swear at another person. I don't necessarily swear at the character or the boss that is currently, you know, causing me trouble in a modern home console game. It's a really good point.
Well, like, yeah, I mean, I'm just like seconding everything everyone's saying, but like a space is a really important thing. Like when we first started out, we were in like the basement of this DIY punk venue called Silent Barn, and we actually didn't curate this game. We just kind of like put up Lost Pig, which is like an interactive fiction game, one of the most incredible things happened because it's like totally not an arcade game. You know, it's like this really long experience. You're supposed to sit and play through it. And so people go there for a show and they play for like 5 or 10 minutes and they write their notes down and then post it on the arcade cabinet. And so after a month you have this entire arcade cabinet like filled with notes of like where to go, what's happened, and like you would just read through and then it would bring you to where you were in the game. And I thought that was like one of the coolest things.
Because even though you haven't played with those people, suddenly you've played with those people. You
Yes.
have a shared experience because you went to this physical location
Yes.
to do it. Now, how many of you guys are doing games that do not require physical location? Are any of you guys currently working on mobile, for instance? Okay, so like, is that a big problem? Because this is the opposite. You know, I can play your game on my phone in my car. You know, a totally single player and away from everybody. There's no social interaction there, unless you make it. Can you build in any sort of helpful or useful social interactions when you're working on a game that has no physical limitations whatsoever and just sort of exists in the ether and whatever device you choose?
I mean, it depends on what the experience is that you want to make, right? If you're creating a single-player Metroidvania game, how social does it need to be?
It doesn't.
Right. So,
But you can say that for the text adventure too. You know, like Zork is a one-player game, and yet we're going to do a panel of PAX Prime where the entire room plays Zork together.
right.
What about Demon Souls or Dark Souls? That game is really cool socially because although you can't, I don't think you can jump in the same room and fight a demon together, you see these little ghost spirits, other people placed in the world, and they'll tell you little hints. And it's actually curated, like you can't just type whatever you want because obviously it's the internet and that would be horrible like we were talking about, but...
Shit cock! Over and over.
Yeah, thank you. Instead it'll be like, you know, beware. It'll be these ominous messages, they're very vague and subtle, like it'll give you suggestions, maybe like try the spear and that might work better with that boss. I like to see stuff like that. Like that would work really well in our gauntlet style game, you know, like you go up to the dragon boss and it's like, you know, go for the next or something. But that might be a way, is like it's curated and it's not like multiplayer at the same time. It's more like, you know, asynchronous, kind of like somebody else was here, like someone can spray paint on the wall, you know, like a warning or something.
It sounds like a lot like what Saeed was talking about too, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Panos wants to ask a question. Let's speak up.
Okay, what about the business side? Is there a way to make money?
I think that's what everybody wants to know. I mean, it's a real issue, and I think a lot of people are addressing it.
I mean, it feels like you guys are developing out of love, like a lot of game developers do. You do it because you want to make this game, but there is a financial reality that the video game business still ends with the word business. Are you finding that making new arcade games is a sustainable thing? I mean, are you able to continue making stuff without, you know, giant government grants from art collectives?
It's sustainable as long as me and Josh keep putting money into it.
Okay, yeah,
Well, there's this interesting model in New York where, you know, since the early 80s, there's this venue called ABC No Rio, and it was like it's a DIY punk venue, and it's one of the first DIY punk venues, and the space it created for punk music was that you could go see these shows, and people would, you know, pay at the door and it'd go directly to the bands. And so it created this like space for people who just like made music and would get a little bit of money, just enough to survive, but you know didn't have to sign a record deal. And that's basically what we kind of have been trying to do, is like be that same space for like DIY independent game developers, where you know you can come to a show and you pay a little bit of money, and we give some of the money to the developers and some of the money to the bands or whatever to host the space. So like that's one model we've been trying out,
and that leaves the creators free to create, and you just help them however you can. To a certain extent, Nick is like, yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, without a day job, you cannot survive on
Sure.
it, for sure.
Okay.
So the way that we're finishing up Siege Breakers, luckily the first half of it, we were seniors in college at UC Santa Cruz. Go Slugs. Woo. But yeah, banana slugs. So we crowdfunded through Kickstarter. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Kickstarter, it's kind of a crowdfunding website where you ask for a certain amount of money and you do a campaign and you promise rewards, kind of like a slightly less annoying version of NPR's donor pledging that they do every once in a while.
You get more than a tote bag, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And so we were able to raise $10,000 off of that, and that's enough to finish the game, hopefully. And I think that crowdfunding like Kickstarter is actually a great place for games like this, where it kind of has a niche focus, because those kinds of groups, while small, tend to be relatively dedicated, and if you can really speak to them and kind of promise them something that they want, then they can help you finish it. And so it's this interesting model.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear how everybody feels about crowdfunding, because some people are seeing it as like the magic bullet, and other people are like, oh God, that'll never work out, and my project is doomed.
Well, I mean, we're discussing crowdfunding in our own studio for another project, but I think basically, and it's kind of tailor-made for software that you download and put on your computer, or you're playing it on PlayStation 3 or something like that, right? That model makes a lot of sense. But if you're doing an arcade cabinet, right, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to crowdfund the arcade cabinet, but then if there's no arcades for it to go in,
right?
It's almost like we need to crowdfund arcades.
Yeah, help me build a giant piece of wood that you will never actually get to experience, which was the whole point of this all along, is I wanted you to experience my giant wooden cabinet.
Right.
Yeah.
We actually launched a Kickstarter for Crypt Run yesterday, so I'd like to pick your brain later since you figured it out. So
what shouldn't we have done that we've already?
What did we already mess up? Yeah, it was really interesting. A gamer came by our table earlier and was like, "You guys should take your game and put it in an arcade cabinet." And I'm like, "Yeah, we should." And we were talking about Kickstarter and stuff, and he was like, "What you do is you create a separate Kickstarter project just for the cabinet." Like, I've got some friends who work on cabinets, and they probably love, they get paid a little bit of money, just enough to, cover the costs and everything, and they make a cabinet, and we put our game in it. Like, that's something, but then, like you're talking about, so you got the cabinet, now what? Like, there's nowhere to put it?
Come to Idaho and play the only game, it's got to be out in multiples, or it's got to be able to go on tour, which is its own expense.
Yeah.
If you're going to be part of a moving show or something like that.
The only thing I can think of is like as a demo unit, and that would be pretty cool. You could take your arcade, your one arcade cabinet, and take it to like PAX or here, of course. But then if you want to take that and mass produce it, like I don't know, there's Dave & Buster's, but like the arcades are clearly not nearly as prevalent as they were in the 80s or earlier.
Yeah.
Here's an idea that we had in the car on the way here that I think is kind of interesting. Maybe afterwards, like, let me know if you think it's a good idea or a bad idea. But at the end of our game, it shows you a little screenshot of the winning move, winning play. And so we were thinking of taking that and also taking a picture of your team, and like on the side of the cabinet, yeah, you can like pay $1 or whatever, and you get a printed picture of you and your team and the winning play, and you take it home. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think of.
Yeah, would you pay for that?
Yeah, can we? Get a show of hands. Does anybody think it's a good idea? Raise your hand.
Are you saying like after a roller coaster, like when you're on a roller coaster?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
That's an amazing idea.
Well, our game is kind of a team experience, right? It's 5-on-5, so it's kind of an event.
That's great.
Do you think it's feasible to come up with, to extend the Kickstarter thing? Here's a kit. When I think about Cards Against Humanity, which was another really big Kickstarter thing, again, it's much easier when you are printing a deck of cards. But people went out of their way to evangelize about that. Let me bring my Cards Against Humanity to you. And if you have a 5-on-5 game with arcade joysticks, Killer Queen is quite the setup. But you're going to find people who are specialized people who want to say, I'm having a party, or I'm having this event, or I'm going to this public place, and everybody should come in and play it. This show is only once a year. PAX, there's 2 in America, 1 in Australia. You have some venues. Is it feasible to sort of encourage your audience to help you build the experience that you want to deliver?
There could be an outlet for you kind of like a traveling party. I don't know if you've seen these companies that have been popping up, where they basically like, I don't know, for privileged kids or something, they'll have like a party where I've seen like robot suits. They bring them and kids can get into them and they transform. And we're talking about like really expensive, high-dollar parties. There might be something there. Like you could part of, like you've got a bunch of arcade cabinets, and like that would interest me is like a birthday party full of arcade cabinets, just like in your house or in your yard or something.
They do that with the Xboxes in a truck. They have a whole bunch of HD, basically take a U-Hauls, bolt some HD TVs onto the side of the wall, put some couches on the opposite side, 4 or 5 Xboxes in the back of the truck, and it's all air conditioned, and you pay like $1,000 to have it come out for the birthday or something, and you just play all day.
Yeah.
So you could do something with that with arcade machines, so it's a little bit more space tight.
To me, the difference is, because like Rock Band is a really good example from the last 5 years of a very social game that people wanted to go and experience, but you had the benefit of mass-produced plastic instruments, right? Frankly, when we did it, it was like, who's got the best drum kit? And we went to your house, you know, whoever the crazy person was that spent $300 for the really good drum kit. But, you know, the problem is if you can't get people to mass-produce the thing that you need to play your game. I mean, you know, a 5-on-5 game is amazing, but most, you know, home consoles support 4 players. Maybe you can get 8 players, and if you want them all to have arcade joysticks, it's really difficult. Is there any room for having people say, like, here, Kickstart, and here's a kit, we'll send you the plywood and the, you know, the half parts, and here you go? Or is that just, beyond what you
mention that?
Oh, have I segued perfectly into something?
One idea that we're kicking around a lot of ideas, but one idea that we're kicking around is having a portable, like, home version, which is like 5 half buttons, 5 joysticks, and either it's got like a Raspberry in it or something, and you know it's all you just plug it into your TV, or maybe it works with your PC or something. We're not quite sure, but that would be one. And then you play network against a whole other team. So that's one thing that we've been talking about. So it's still that kind of team experience, and it's still local multiplayer. It's using the network, but getting 10 people in your house is kind of hard.
Sure.
But if you buy 2 of them, sure, you can do, you know.
You can get 10 people to show up for pub trivia. You know, we have things like that are really good examples of community gaming, you know, and liquor never hurts, but, you know, it occurs to me maybe this is where barcades go. You know, barcades right now are really just taking the stuff that's out in that room and putting it next to a keg. But if we can make a new social center, that might be really cool.
And we would love to be part of that. I mean,
great. Well, I look forward to going to yours. Get on that, please.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we've been, with Baby Castles has been interesting because we've been trying to encourage this culture of like, look, you can just start this yourself. It's like the first year we started Baby Castles, we spent about $650 on it the entire year, and $450 went to a neon sign. And the rest was just like, you know.
It's very pretty though. I've seen pictures of it online. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty, yeah. I love that guy, the person who made it. And so like you know, it's not a lot of money, right? And if you can find some sort of economic model where you have these shows and you have like some sort of door price to sustain it, and like even pay the staff, you know, if it doesn't have to be all volunteer, and sell little liquor, whatever, and you can have your own Baby Castles anywhere, right? And then you can, you know, like email Josh or Nick and be like, hey, I'd like to put up Click Queen, and then, you know, you can have a Click Queen anywhere, you know. So.
Panos, you raised your hand like 10 minutes ago. Did we move past what you wanted to discuss?
I just wanted to ask, one thing I observed is there's definitely a difference.
That was my next question. Sorry, no, is there a geographical center? Is there
geographical difference? I'm more curious about the East Coast guys have noticed while coming out here. Because I was surprised that you guys had not really experienced this.
This is completely insane.
Yeah, this is like way over the top.
Yeah, I agree. I think in New York it necessitates like people like Nick and I at least, like we have to do a certain so we have to make certain games in our day jobs that are like very different than the games that are being made out here. And, we do like a lot of work for hire games and casual games and ad games and stuff like that. And I think maybe that drives us to like make a certain type of a smaller game when we're doing like an independent project. And there's a certain aesthetic of games that are being made in New York, I think.
And I think, the fact that there's no AAA studios in New York, and there's just not the same amount of money flowing in New York for games. We have a lot of money in New York, but none of it is going towards games.
Right.
So that's a huge cultural difference between, I think, West Coast and East Coast.
My company, Lost Decade, is actually right here. Mountain View. I'm curious, are you guys from New York or East Coast?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn? Oh, wow. What about, curious?
Oh, Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz.
So just over 17.
Banana slugs. Cool.
So there's no East Coast, West Coast like rap rivalry. We're not going to see,
We're going to fight right after this.
I'm gonna put a cap in there. No.
There's no rivalry, but they're in the same way that like East Coast and West Coast rap have different styles. I think we have different styles.
Right. How do you define the East Coast style of indie gaming? Or can
I think it's more formal and like less focused on theme, more on mechanics,
Okay.
and like small, elegant mechanics.
There's also like the arts in New York, and so there's a lot of artists and musicians who make games as well. So you have like people like Mark Besson being shown at the New Museum and stuff like that. So
I mean, I remember I actually lived in Brooklyn for a while, for 3 years, and I miss Colorado definitely. But I remember going out to the Museum of Modern Image, Museum of Moving Image. They were the very first place that I remember ever doing interactive games as art. They were like, no, this is it. This was in the mid-90s. And I remember thinking like, God, great, now all museums everywhere. Well, and it just didn't. But it does seem that New York is in tune with the fact that games can be viewed as art. But by contrast, you West Coast guys, what do you feel defines your games? Do you see the differences that they see? Do you even agree with that statement?
I've seen less of the live aspect on the West Coast. I keep hearing about cool stuff going on in New York. Like, is that Joust.js? It's that game you can play. Like, if you've seen this, you play with an iPhone, or I think it's the PlayStation Move. But it's like, yeah, you kind of want to smack it out of their hands almost. It's like you don't want to move, but anyway, check it out. It's cool. On the West Coast, there's plenty of indies out here. There's like Team Meat is in Santa Cruz. Jonathan Blow did Braid, is up in San Francisco. Derek Yu is a huge indie. He did Spelunky and Aquaria. They're up in San Francisco. But it tends to be something that's like, a lot of these teams are very small. Team Meat's 2 people. Jonathan Blow and Derek Yu, both just 1 guy. And it's not games. They're more single player, and they don't try to like have an event as much. And that's something I wish it was just more of a thing on the West Coast. I'm kind of jealous of the East Coasters because I think it's so cool. I mean, California Extreme's awesome, and playing games with people is so cool.
Do you think it's because the distances are so far here? I mean, like in New York, I ride my bike to Josh's house, and whatever. I mean, we're all kind of in a 3-mile radius. So that
Absolutely, like in San Francisco, like so I live in Mountain View, and that's only like 50-minute drive on the best day ever. But like if I'm talking about your average commute, it's going to take me 2 hours one way maybe to get up there, and it's like it does feel like our mass transit is pretty terrible here. And maybe if it was better, it was like in New York, you can just you're there in 10 minutes. That would probably make a big difference, yeah.
I know, at least from my experience going to school at UC Santa Cruz, we've got an amazing program, but it's really hard to get people from the industry to come and speak from Silicon Valley because nobody wants to go over the 17. That is a death trap.
One other difference I've noticed, and I don't know why, but West Coast indie developers, I think, tend to work on a single game at a time. Do you guys? Is that true for you guys? Like you're working a single game, whereas we are like Nick and I were talking about it, and at one point I was like working on 11 games at one time. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah, at any given moment, I'm working on 3 or 4 games, because between my own indie work and the stuff I'm pumping out for whatever Adult Swim or Nickelodeon or whatever, and my projects with Josh, that's quite a bit of projects that I'm less involved in some than I am in others, but
I think that's fair. From what I've seen, the West Coasters is, not one game ever, but definitely one game at a time. And then, like your average developer probably had, like I've got some side projects and there's, 3 games I'm kind of tinkering with or whatever, but it's really just all about Crypt Run right now. And I think that's probably true. A lot of the indies out here in the West Coast are just like one at a time.
And I want that.
yeah, I want that too. I do, I want that.
Here I'm about to say, Matt Mark, why are you so damn lazy? But, you guys are developing, again, you mentioned some of the game clients that you have. You're working on stuff for Nickelodeon, Adult Swim, and things like that. Certainly not to say, oh, no, I don't want to do that much work. But do you actually wish that you could just focus on one big idea and focus on that instead of...
Are you kidding?
Well,
yeah, of course.
Some people thrive as a multitasker. Some people are just like, I get bored if I'm only doing one thing.
Maybe 2.
Yeah, I'll do 2 so I have some variety.
Okay.
Otherwise, yeah.
I'll tell you.
I want one. I
Most of
You do too. He'd like to do what?
one game is plenty, because like we were preparing for this demo here at California Stream for like 2 weeks, going crazy, ordering supplies and like stickers, and just like coming here and testing the demo and getting ready for the Kickstarter. Like one game, if you take care of all the the supporting stuff you have to do, can already be overwhelming. And like the more balls you're juggling, you start to drop them. You know, and it can be a good thing just to focus on the one game, but it's hard to resist sometimes. You're like, oh, I bet this weekend I can make that prototype that I've been itching to work on. You're like, and then 2 days later you're like, oh, what did I do? Now I have this thing I have to work on.
Yeah, but the benefit of having so many projects going on is that you can, at least in New York, you can show it to a lot of people in person and get feedback. So Hokra, that's being shown today, that was commissioned by the NYU Game Center. And Ramiro was working on that for like, I don't know, like 6 months. And then like about a week or 2 weeks before he was supposed to show it, he hated the game. And so he rewrote it completely. And that's what this is now, you know.
This is a rewrite.
Yeah, this is the rewrite. And so he like dished everything and just like, and then showed it to a bunch of people and they loved it and that was it. And so there's you know.
Rapid prototyping.
Yeah, which is, and New York lends itself to rapid prototyping.
So we're not out of time, but I want to leave some time for questions from the audience. And I kind of want to ask you, what do games need to do to move forward? More like, where have you guys screwed up? What are the mistakes that you've made along the way that you would like to advise anybody else who's thinking of doing a new arcade game or thinking of getting into game development? Based on your experiences, what do you recommend you not do?
I know one. Don't work on what people tell you should work on. Work on what drives you. Like, because that's where most people start with indies. Is they have an idea. Like, there's a game they want to play, or like an itch they have to scratch, or like something that they want to create, right? And what happened with us, we were actually web developers for like 10 years each, my business partner and I. And then HTML5, does this make sense to anyone? It's web tech, basically. Like, it works in the browser, but it's getting to the point where it's more like Flash, where it'll work everywhere, and then also you can make you can get it on your phone, you can get it on desktop. So that's what HTML5 is, and so we're using web tech, and people push you toward in a certain direction, just like in the industry. And they wanted us to make social games, they wanted us to make mobile games, and like, we're Xbox gamers, like that's what we do on the weekend. We're playing like, you know, Spelunky and Gauntlet and that kind of stuff. And then once we got past that barricade, like that border, we're like, we no longer have to work on what other companies want us to work on. That's when you get games like Crypt Run that like, we like to think you can feel like that we love it, you know what I mean? And like, just work on what you like, what you're passionate about.
That's fair.
I think a common mistake is to keep things hidden and keep them to yourself. I think the best thing you can do is like show the game as early as possible to as many people as you can.
What's the benefit that you get from that? Is it the kind of rapid prototyping stuff that Sage was talking about?
Yeah, you can. I think the most important thing is you see what resonates with people. Like, you can just see they're having fun with this part of the game, or you can just see they're not having fun at all and like move on to another project.
Do you have any formal? This is part of the social interaction. Like, you get to. The nice thing about coming here is you see brand new people playing games, and you can just watch them. You know, it's. Do you have any formal focus grouping for your stuff, or is it really just like, hey guys, got a new build, come on over when you can?
So my wife is actually in the audience, and she's a user researcher. So that's what she does for a living, is watch just people play games and then tells the developers how to fix it. So that's advantageous to our little indie company.
So marry well, is what you're saying.
Marry up.
Marry up into audience research. Wow, we could do an entire thing with you, just like, is this really the most common gaming phrase that you see every time that you're watching? Sorry. Mistakes or how you people play your game.
Don't trust the French. That's my only advice.
That's great. Where do you get in trouble for explaining that? Because Ubisoft is not far. They're just up in the city.
Doesn't work for Ubisoft.
Beware.
Yeah. I guess we don't make games, right?
Right, no, but
so it's an interesting. I mean, we've kind of made games. We've worked with institutions like Museum of Natural History to make a planetarium game, and then we were in Paris actually and made a bunch of like this cat town installation where you crawl into this cat town and play like a cat. They're cat games, and so we've done stuff that's more sculptural and like one-offs. But I think what's important, what we've learned is like, make sure you get paid If you are doing something for for money, or if it's a collaboration, make sure there's like upfront contract and and like all that stuff is written down and when you're going to get paid and all that kind of stuff. It's it's easy to get excited about a project and then put yourself in a place where you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I said yes to this, and and get resentful and stuff, and then not do it again. So I think it's like definitely communicating, being upfront is a really key thing.
So I guess my piece of advice would kind of be playing off of the playtest early and often thing. Don't get too stuck into tunnel vision. That's a problem I definitely have. And so we kind of went into the tank for a bit too long, and when we finally emerged with something that we actually could show to people, we ended up having to redesign some sizable chunks of the game just because of some issues there. And I think if we had just started getting sanity checks earlier, I think it would have been helpful.
But it's still worth it.
Yes.
Okay. Everybody agrees you still like making new arcade games.
Okay.
Any questions? We've got a couple of minutes left. We've got like 10 minutes. So if anybody has some questions, sure, go ahead.
So we've talked a lot about being, your inspiration and it being an arcade. And I feel like kids today, teenagers in particular, don't have that experience in their youth necessarily. Like they're brought up either living with their friends if we're lucky, or more likely than not, they're on their phone playing by themselves somewhere. So are we fooling ourselves in thinking that the resurgence of an arcade environment, is it just the nostalgics like me that come to conferences that want these things? Or is it something that we can, I guess, give them the experience of somehow and have them foster that for the next generation? Is it something that's possible, you think, or is it a kind of lost part?
We run a tournament every month at NYU, and there's a bunch of kids that are showing up, never went to an arcade in their life, and they're totally digging it, and it's growing every month. So I think there's a possibility. Of course, without arcades, it's difficult.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, by kids, you mean like 16 and up,
Yes,
right?
16
It's not
and
like it's not. I don't see it being popular with like little kids.
Well,
Right.
there's
Well,
a
but they're the next
difficult.
generation, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
10-year-olds, the 5-year-olds, the whatever of today are the ones that I wonder what their expectation will be as we go forward. Because I mean, we get really wrapped around the axle around an arcade cabinet and that sort of physical model and joysticks and buttons where kids say, oh, touch, 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 touch. And so there's a distinction, it seems.
Well, there's also like this, whole maker community. Like, so that's one of the reasons why I teach a middle school, like I teach an after school program called, electronics program called Short Circuit. And we work with Arduinos, and we work with like breaking open mice and hacking them and wiring, taking like a couple of wires, soldering to a mouse button, and then remapping it with auto hockey and stuff like this. And what's cool is like we tinker and make stuff and then show stuff, right? And so like it's really important for kids to learn how to make stuff physically and how to understand how technology works and electricity works in a lower level, and then bringing that to like bringing it and showing it to other people. I think that is kind of, if it's sort of related to like going to an arcade and playing games.
So I think that if you put a kid in front of an arcade game, they'll play no matter what. Whether or not it's prevalent in the culture, I think is a little bit more questionable. But I think you'll definitely see arcades' influences spread out through games. I mean, with a lot of the iOS games where they're trying to get in-app purchases, it's very similar to a lot of the design decisions built around quarters. So it's kind of like arcade games are the ancestors of what you're seeing right now. So kind of like birds and dinosaurs almost, where you can see parts of it. Yeah, angry birds and dinosaurs.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think there is definitely still an interest in the social interaction like you're seeing here. I was at Santa Cruz Boardwalk a few weeks ago, and
I was there last night. It's awesome.
it's pretty impressive how the stuff that's here is all sequestered in the corner, right? But they also have large spaces dedicated now to show-off games, like the rhythm games. And what surprised me are these gigantic oblong touch screens that are like a handheld magnified giant.
Right.
And they're with each other. They're all playing with each other. They got Temple Run and they got a couple other things. And there's clearly an interest there. They've even got a quiz game down there. I mean, gigantic screen, the big buzz-in buttons and everything. But it seems so, bringing it back to independence doesn't scale well when hardware is involved. So how is that going to make the transition? I mean, do you need to partner up with a distributor or a publisher? How's that going to work to get that stuff into the big places?
I feel like with mobile, there's got to be something because we're getting close to an age where almost everybody has a smartphone in their pocket, and that seems like that could be a controller. You know what I mean? And then with stuff like Wiimotes, and then like Ouya is $100 for like a modern console. Like that starts to be closer to stuff that independents like us could maybe afford. On like certainly not scale like we made 100,000 of them when we launched them around, but like we could make 5 or 25 and start to go to local businesses or something. But the hardware is definitely getting more within reach. Like the price is going down.
Well, also, isn't it true that like you can come up with a great idea and like build a prototype, and I mean you can find funders if it really is a good idea. So there's that part of it. You don't have to be independent forever, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and also I think you see a lot of these style of games just being played like on a computer with a projector. I mean that's what we're doing out there, and like with baby castles, like you use like computers and basic screens and stuff. I mean, so it's not like all custom cabinets or anything like that. It's a lot of them is just stock hardware that everybody kind of has.
I love the idea of having your smartphone and using it as a controller in a larger space and going to a place that has a game that lets you participate. I don't know if anybody was here a couple of years ago when they did Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and they had the fastest finger and they had this sort of audience participation stuff with people on their phones, and it was interesting because it was still very much in beta, but it was awesome that everybody in the room got to play when they polled the audience, and that's what they were banking on. Like, well, there's enough people that are coming to this venue that have an iPhone that we can say, if you've got an iPhone, we want you to play along, and they did. So that's a really interesting way to look at it. You might be able to create a social space game, but everybody brings their own part to that game to make it a whole game. That's a really interesting way to look at the social dynamic that might work out, and that can, games can therefore erupt anywhere if you have that home base, or that destination rather that they go to take part.
Going off the whole giant touchscreen thing you were talking about earlier, I actually worked on a prototype for eBay. They're trying to make physical mall kiosks that are like a giant tablet plus a Kinect that can recognize people as they're going through the mall, kind of like gamify the store, but actually put actual games onto it and make it interesting and entertaining so that people actually want to go to brick and mortar malls, because there's this kind of weird paradigm where the internet, you can always find a better price in the mall almost always. So kind of trying to preserve the malls in some sense with some game systems. It's actually something that they're trying to work on. It's very interesting.
The malls where I used to go to play games. Full circle. Thank you guys all so much. I want you each to plug either your company or your Twitter or whatever, let everybody know. And if your game is here and it's playable, or if you're representing a game that's here and playable, please just let everybody know before we wrap up.
Sure, we're Lost Decade Games. We have a table, it's the Crypt Run table. There's 2 stations. Please come by, say hi, and play some games.
I'm Josh Demonis, and my company is Sortasoft, and my collaboration with Nick is out there. It's called Killer Queen, so come check it out, please.
And for Killer Queen, we have a Facebook page. If you want to find out more about it, it's facebook.com/Killer Queen Game, I think. Yeah, that's right. /Killer Queen Game. And my name is Nikita Mikros, and I head up a company named Smashworks. We make some good stuff.
Also, we have a mailing list for people to stay apprised of like our events and whatever else we do at the game. So give me your email address if you're interested.
So my name is Syed, and I'm with Baby Castles. You can find us at Baby Castles or babycastles.com/website. And I don't have anything to plug except for this book that I think everyone should read. It's called Rise of the Video Game Zinesters. It's by Anthropy, and it's really rad. So you should check it out.
Where are you located?
Brooklyn.
My name is Mark Giroux. I'm the project lead at Make Base Studios. You can check out our game Siegebreakers at siegebreakersgame.com, Facebook.com/siegebreakersgame, Twitter at the Siegebreaker. And yeah, it's a really cool game. We're doing completely unique four-player dynamic split screen. It borrows a lot of elements from Gauntlet, beat 'em ups, and Dig Dug, and a lot of other games. It's a heck of a thing.
Cool. Thank you guys so much for all your time. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for coming.